Episode 2, the double-edged sword of bisexual attraction. Because you know you guys are horn dogs, right?
I've heard that from nobody.
Is that the part where we were supposed to laugh?
Yeah, you guys both looked very serious about that.
It was funny. It was funny.
Okay.
No, it was funny.
Today I'm joined by Tara Scott, reviewer extraordinaire at many, many places, including the Lesbian Review, and Rae D Magdon, author, podcaster, and all-round generally awesome human being. Thank you both for joining me today.
Aww.
Hello.
Okay, so the question today is, being attracted to men and women leads to all sorts of misconceptions and false ideas. People think you can't decide, or that you're going to end up in a heterosexual space just because it's easier. That, I think, is one of the most prevalent myths. We have lesbians saying that women will break your heart if they're bisexual and end up with a man, ultimately. Let's talk about that. Talk about sexual attraction, being a bisexual, and the vilification of your sexual needs, I suppose.
I'm going to be pretty blunt about this, so I hope that that's okay. But staying closeted for me was never an option. Obviously, some people stay closeted for their safety. I'm not talking about that. But emotionally, for me, once I got to a certain point where I was able to come out and be safe about it, it certainly wasn't an option. My choices were to come out as a lesbian and later come out as bisexual, or basically to harm myself. And so this whole idea that we can just pass as straight and hide in the closet and it'll be fine and it won't affect us, that's absolutely not true. I personally, I could never have done that. My sexuality is such an important part of who I am, and it's so fundamental to my understanding of myself. I could never just put that in a box and put it away forever. And I know sometimes it takes people time to figure themselves out, and sometimes people stay closeted for their own physical safety, but emotional safety is important too, and I would not have been emotionally safe in the closet. So passing as straight just simply was not an option for me, mental health wise. It just wasn't an option. So I don't know where people get that misconception, but staying in the closet is just as harmful to bisexual women as it is to anyone else who isn't straight.
Yeah.
So Tara, you try to deny that part of yourself for several years.
Oh, most of my life.
Talk about that. Talk about how, what was the emotional effect when you finally actually came out?
When I first figured it out, what's funny is I feel like, so I recorded a podcast recently with Lee Lynch, which is not out yet, and should be out kind of later in June. So I don't know if it'll be up before or after this episode is up. But I actually asked her about how she used the word coming out, because I've noticed this in a few of her books, and especially her first book. Because Lee Lynch came out in the 1960s when it was illegal to be gay. And so I noticed, I was like, you used coming out to talk about that, did you mean figuring it out for yourself or telling the world? And she was like, aha. And she said, actually, we used it as both, because often when you're figuring it out for yourself, you're telling other people. So I feel like in this case, when you're asking me about coming out, it was very much that, doing it for myself first before I could do it for other people. It wasn't like I was finally telling people about something that I knew about for years and years. It was like I was finally figuring it out, and I was in my early 30s, which feels later, especially right now when you hear about 10-year-olds know and it's no big deal. And it was really scary at first. It was really, really scary, because I could see that I had told myself all along that it wasn't safe to acknowledge this part of myself, that I would lose something if I did that, whether it was friends or community or most importantly, family. But luckily, my husband, Neil, was the one who was like, no, it's okay. Let's dig into this. Let's look at it. Let's see what it means. Let's see what happens. And so when I first started telling people, it also felt really scary, because everybody knew that I was an evangelical Christian. I don't identify that way anymore. I identify as agnostic at best at this point. because I didn't feel like there was a place for me there anymore. And I didn't come out to people at church because that definitely didn't feel safe. And that was a part of why I ended up walking away. Between that and there was another thing that happened that I needed support, and I realized I can't turn to these people. So I would go and I would sit at church every week and I would hate myself. Meanwhile, I'm telling all of my other friends who are atheists or agnostic, and they were all like, this is amazing. It's another thing we know about you now. We love you. This is so great. That it was one of those like, well, okay, one of these things makes me feel really good, and one of these things doesn't make me feel really good. And it was like the more I came out and people were cool about it, the better it felt. And rarely did anyone say, well, that's not valid. You're married to a man. Like, how can you say that? And I could have chosen to pass as straight because I certainly thought I was straight for long enough. It would have been very easy to just keep my mouth shut and not tell anybody, because on the outside, it looks like nothing has changed. Or at that point, it looked like nothing had changed. So, I mean, I could have just kept rolling with the status quo, but that didn't feel right either. That felt really uncomfortable, kind of like wearing a shirt that's 4 sizes too small. So why would I choose to do that? And I'm pretty open about it with everyone now, and it just feels good.
So, like, just to clarify, like, it would have been easy logistically, but not easy for your mental health.
Exactly. But I also can totally understand that there are some people that it just wouldn't be safe. And I don't judge anybody who doesn't come out because they're not in a situation where, like, maybe it's not safe with their family. Maybe they're in a country where it's not legal. Like, there are different reasons where it may not be safe for someone to come out. And I can totally understand and I can fully sympathize and empathize with somebody for why they would do that, because I certainly did it to myself for many years.
I think that's the thing, though. Being true to yourself is super important. It actually doesn't matter what your journey is, because if you're not true to yourself, you're losing something.
And you're harming yourself. Like, I can see now that I was kind of actively isn't the right way to put it. It wasn't like I was deliberately harming myself, but like looking back, I can see the harm that I was doing to my emotional and mental health by operating in that way.
I remember when you first started talking to me about about your journey, and I remember, and looking back now, you are such a much happier human being than you were then. Yeah,
much happier.
And the only thing that's changed is that you've just come to terms with your own space. So it's not a case of you suddenly went out and got yourself a girlfriend, or you went and slept around on your husband, or nothing changed except your own personal journey. Do you know? So to vilify women who are bisexual and think that they're some kind of like sex addict and that wants to go, sleep with everything under the sun is very inaccurate.
I don't have time for that.
You're reading too much Lesfic.
I have yeah, right? I'm reading Lesfic. I got a podcast. I got a family. I got a job. Like, I don't have time to sleep with everybody under the sun. I don't have the energy for that.
All right, so let's get to some questions that came from Facebook. Julie says, bisexual women can be vilified from both men and women. Men can think she's a lesbian and just doesn't want to admit it, or think that it's their chance for a fantasy threesome with 2 women. Lesbian women don't want to date bisexual women because they feel that the bisexual woman is just experimenting or passing time until a man comes along. I've actually heard that a lot. Have either of you experienced that?
Definitely. I said this in the previous episode, but I don't interact with a lot of straight people that aren't family members, to be honest. Just saying. But so I've encountered situations where cisgender straight men have taken my sexuality as an invitation. They think that it's something performative that I do for them, and that's absolutely not true. Like, I'm not interested in men except for Tori. Like, I certainly am not interested in, them, but they have been harmed by the culture in a way and have harmed me because our culture feeds men this idea that lesbians are a porn category, that lesbians aren't really lesbians, that bisexual women are like the ultimate goal, and that bisexual is, again, I'm going to use the word performative. It's something that women do for them to attract them, to get their attention. And it's like, you're not that great. But yeah, and then I've also had to deal, mostly online, not in person. Online, I've had to deal with lesbians who think I'm some kind of traitor, I guess, because I chose to stay in my relationship. And I don't know why they're so angry about it, because it's funny, I'll get messages that say, you can't identify as a lesbian now that you're with a man. And I'm like, well, I don't. That's like the entire reason that I changed my label, is so it couldn't be used to harm others. Like, my internal experience is very close to the lesbian experience, because, you know, I've been on that journey and I identified as lesbian for so many years. But my external experience is that of a bisexual woman. And so that's the label that I choose to use. And it's just funny. I think people, they want so badly to be mad at me. This small group, it's a small group, this small group of people. And it's like, they want so badly to be mad at me for my situation that they kind of rewrite the story so that I'm identifying as something I don't even identify as. It's funny. And I think also people, they use it as a weapon against me because they dislike other things about, I don't know, my blog or whatever. But it's surprising how many lesbians are totally chill with it. Like, there's lots of lesbians, because most of my friends are queer women, who are just like, well, yeah, I get that. It's really sweet that you stayed with your partner and that you two are so happy and in love. That's wonderful. And you're always welcome in my space. So I think the vast majority of lesbians and queer women that I've talked to have been very accepting of it. But there's, you know, that small group. And they're usually TERFs as well, so I don't really care what they think.
What's a TERF?
A TERF? Oh, a TERF is a trans exclusionary radical feminist. So they are people who think that trans women are not actually women. And so I don't really put stock in any of their opinions anyway, because they're so wrong about that issue. So, you know, I'm not going to listen to that crap anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, trans exclusionary radical feminist. And unfortunately, some people use the word TERF online and Tumblr, like on Tumblr, as a weapon, like to discredit someone, even if the person, I actually know a trans woman who was called a TERF and put on a TERF list because someone wanted to harass her. And it's like, a trans woman can't be a TERF. But real actual TERFs, and not people who are just using it as a name calling thing, are people who don't believe trans women are women and are highly transphobic.
Okay.
There is often overlap too with, like, TERFs are often highly biphobic because they don't think you actually can be a bisexual. They think that you're a lesbian when you're with a woman, or you're straight when you're with a man, and there is no in between. And they also often overlap with SWERFs, which is sex worker exclusive radical feminist, where they think that all sex work is wrong no matter what, and there is no acknowledgement that sex work is real work.
Well, they're equating basically sex workers who are independent contractors and who are their own bosses, instead of the traditional, like, abused girl who has a pimp, with human trafficking. And they're not acknowledging that these are two separate groups of people, and that harms both groups of people.
So now let's get to another question. Enrico asks, what are the things, and I mean psychologically, Shem, he's so sweet, that attract you to men and women, and that you don't like in either gender? So, but hang on, I just want to combine that with Maggie, I apologize for pronouncing your name incorrectly, says also, the few bisexuals I know seem to enjoy sexual relationships with women much more than with men, but are more attracted to men romantically. Okay, so basically what both people are getting to is, what are the differences between the genders? Does it make a difference to who you're attracted to emotionally versus physically?
Well, on the one hand, I don't know if I'm a very good person to answer this question, because I'm basically almost exclusively attracted to women, but my personal life experience has allowed me to grow alongside another person whom I really love, who came out as a trans man. So I know that when it comes to Tori, I'm attracted to his sense of humor. I'm attracted to his positivity. I'm attracted to his kindness and his gentleness. I'm attracted to a lot of the things that I would be attracted to in a woman as well. And, you know, he has really pretty eyes and a nice smile. He has a nice jawline. So, but I definitely think that it's more complicated than just dividing it up between men and women. Normally, you know, I don't relate to pansexuality so much because gender is very important to my attraction. It's like fundamental to a lot of my attractions, and that's the foundation of many of them. But on the other hand, like, to answer this question, I kind of feel like people are people, and it's hard to quantify based on gender why you're attracted to someone. Maybe you'll have a more cohesive answer than me.
All right, let me give it a try. So, more than anything, regardless of the gender, I am attracted, and this is true in friendship as well, right? Because even when we're building friendships, there's a certain attraction to the types of people that we want to build friendships with. It doesn't just have to be romantic relationships. And given that I am in a pretty monogamous marriage right now, friendships are the only relationships that I'm willing to build at this point in my life. So I suppose it applies there. Or if anything happened to my husband, I would be looking for someone who's kind of a lot like him, because I am attracted to people who are thoughtful and kind and funny, but also curious, that have that, like...
That's a good one.
That something in them that drives them to learn more about things that pique their interest. Like, I find that, I find that really attractive, because there are times when he's like, hey, so I was reading this book about first responders in Detroit. And then he'll just go on for quite a while, right? Or there was a detective in Tokyo. And it's like, you know, I'm not necessarily interested in the detective in Tokyo, but I'm interested in how fired up he is about it. And so people have that kind of passion for acquiring new knowledge. I find that incredibly sexy. And that's the kind of thing that I want in people who are a part of my life. In terms of, like, physical attraction, I'm attracted to a lot of people, like a lot of different people. Like, if you watch,
horn dog you,
right? Clearly, that's the problem. Lock me up. But I mean, like, if you look at Thor Ragnarok, I was quite happy to look at most of the people in that movie. I don't want to touch most of them. I just want to, you know, I just wanted to pay my ticket and watch that movie and just look at them and go, God, that's nice. So, I mean, I am probably more attracted to women than I am to men, although I can appreciate a fine specimen, again, from afar, like a Chris Hemsworth or an Idris Elba, because I am but a human. But if I were to enter into another relationship, it would almost certainly be with a woman, because I feel like there's just something really special about Neil. Like, he's just a really special guy for a lot of the reasons that I listed here, as well as how supportive he's been of me in literally anything to do with my life, whether it's helping me unpack my sexuality or pursuing my career, or, you know, he's a stay-at-home dad. He's the primary caregiver for our kids. Like, that's...
I will say that I think I am more attracted to Tori since he came out as bisexual himself, because it gives us another thing to relate about. So, like, he's attracted to men. He's more of the 50-50 sort of bisexual than I am. But it gives us another layer of understanding. And, you know, he would already be under the LGBT acronym as trans, but nonetheless, the fact that he is under the B in the LGBT acronym as well really gives us... I mean, at first I was a little wigged out by it, internalized biphobia, like wondering, is he really gay? Because, of course, he has to be. But no, it gives us another connection, another level of connection. So I would not date another man besides Tori, but, like, if I had to date a man, then I would be looking for one who's not straight. I think I would be looking for one who was part of the community. And I think that's true of my friendships as well. I mean, like, if I'm going to be friends with a dude, it's probably going to be not a straight dude. Like, that's I'm thinking about the men that I'm friends with. I'm mostly friends with women and non-binary folks, but I'm thinking about the few men that I have friendships with, and I don't think any of them are straight.
I think that's a wrap for that one. That's quite an epic episode. Epic. You've been listening to Ask a Bisexual. I'm Sheena. I've been joined today by Rae and Tara. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Bye.